In a public park in Singapore at the reservoir. I started a new job the other day, so I've only been there 2 days. Just in a small factory outlet near the Singapore airport, sticking labels on hand sanitizers, packing them in boxes for the delivery people to pick up. $15 an hour, low pay sort of thing. Gets me out of the house when the wife's not talking to me. Anyway, so lovely, nice young man there, and his family guy sort of thing. He's into art, we get chatting. And he's talking all sorts of topics. And he asked me, what's my view about LGBTQ+. What's he mean? And the gay stuff. And he was asking in a way that evidently wasn't flirting with me. But he also, he wasn't trying to get me to say something bigoted either. But, he was a bit cagey. Yeah, this is Singapore after all. And he knows I'm from London. And I'd openly already talked about, the comparisons of drug culture in London. Singapore, has the death penalty for possession of anything of drugs that would be considered potentially possession in Europe and in North America. There's absolute zero tolerance here, which is very good because there's almost no accessibility to any drugs and no exposure for young people to drugs, it certainly suits the population here. It's all very good. But we talked about it. He's into heavy metal. I knew heavy metal as a kid, but got into hip hop. But I'm 60 now, so I'm not into any music whatsoever now. But I talked openly because he's very, he's cultured, and he was interested in the comparative experiences. Me as when I was a young man growing up in the United Kingdom in London, and his experience in Singapore, but he's into creative arts. So open-minded and wanted to chat. So, I told him, in Singapore, you don't have gay pride marches. You don't have out-and-out screaming queens. And you don't have identity culture. Certainly not like, American university identity culture, where the LGBTQ plus sort of identity culture is. But in London, when I was there in the 90s, every year there would be a gay pride march. Singapore doesn't have gay pride marches. There are bars that are gay bars, like London. The gay bar is not exclusively gay, it's just gay friendly. But you're going to get a lot of gay men there, you get lesbian equivalents. But I explained, a London gay bar might even have a dark room where men are making out or even having sex. Obviously, that definitely would not happen in Singapore. Singapore has decriminalized homosexuality, but, it's still not openly. You can't have a gay marriage. There's no recognition of same-sex relationships for pensions and the like. And whilst you see lesbian women holding hands, you certainly would not see same-sex making out in public. You don't see screaming queens running around in pink boas and things like that. It's not like Thailand, where you have transsexuals, transvestites, and camp cabaret. So you don't get any of that in Singapore. So I explained, look, in London in the 90s, along with my gay friends and my heterosexual friends, gay parade was a carnival that was part of the calendar of the year, the social calendar. You'd go march on the parade through central London, then in the park there would be live music and we'd all hang out, and it was all very mincy. It was all very, very fun. And, that was sort of age when you kind of experiment, and I wasn't sure whether I might want to, but I never did get into cock and bum fun, as it were. But as a teenager, you had gay mates, and you knew they were gay because they kept getting punched in nightclubs and in private house parties. You soon work it out because you're having to defriend your mates who are gay. It was just part of culture. And you look at the music, Proud to be Gay and all of that sort of thing. It was part of the same time as Rock Against Racism and all that sort of thing. There was, if you weren't a square, then you would have gay mates. And if you were in London, then you'd have black mates as well. Unless you're an absolute arsehole, you were kind of into some of your girlfriends were feminists. It was just part of post-70s, 80s, 90s, out and about sort of lifestyle. So, we got chatting. It turned out, actually, he did have gay friends, but he also had a transsexual, not transvestite, transsexual uncle. Someone who would actually physically a man who transitioned to a woman in Singapore. So, that's the thing in Singapore. If there's a medical need, it'll happen. It's not bigoted. It's not forcing people with medical needs. I was saying that I know that in America now they're going through this thing about there's only two genders, and we generally only think about it being two genders, but there can be a bit of ambiguity at birth, and a doctor is forced to make a decision, and sometimes that decision goes the wrong way as people mature, and people have to go through psychiatric and medical processes to realign themselves. And I talked about how although my father left me before I was old enough to discuss it, but my mother had said that my father had said that she reckoned that all mammals have an element of bisexuality. It's just part of our mammals, and therefore humans, need to have physical association. And that's not always going to be, sometimes that's going to be same sex. And in certain cultures where women are taboo, then men are, especially, or where men are working away from home, or prisons would be an example, there's going to be an element of homosexuality. So where you may not have a gay culture, you have a homosexual culture. And that to some extent was how I grew up, is that it's no one's business. If I want to be a homosexual, and this is, some bit of thug life, isn't it? It's my business if I want to be a pervert. If I want a bit of cock and bum fun, then that's my business. It ain't anybody else's business. I don't need to be gay, although later on we started defending people's rights to be gay because we knew the consequences. Those of us who could stand up for ourselves and our rights to be what we wanted to be, we weren't going to face criminalisation and chemical castrations, the likes of people did in the 50s and 60s, things like that. We would just say, mind your own bloody business. We could stand up for ourselves. But later on, when there was gay bashing, men who were stupid enough to get caught out in public conveniences or in public places, in parks, cottaging and doing stupid things, were getting beaten up, or just bigots going around beating up because they just so confused themselves over sexuality that you had to stop gay bashing going on. Singapore's never had gay bashing, to my knowledge. So even though it would appear to be not so advanced legally, Singapore, you're not allowed to go around discriminating, and you're certainly not allowed to go around shouting abuse at people, and you're certainly not allowed to go around beating people up. So even if you are messed up in the head bigger, you keep your fucking mouth shut, is the way in Singapore. So it's safe to be gay in Singapore, probably safer than it is in parts of England, in that sense, because you can't go gay bashing, you can't go queer bashing. But also I mentioned to this guy, he says, look, when you're young, you don't want to be pushing sexuality on young people, but young people still have a discovery of sexuality before they reach age of consent. I was desperate to lose my virginity before I reached the age of consent, and I did. And other people don't lose their virginity till they're in their early 20s. It's different for all people, but I think also as you go through life as an adult, but also as experimenting as a school child, you experiment and you discover your sexuality in different ways, either as heterosexual or as bisexual or whatever. And I think it's safe that people should be able to talk openly about these things. And I think whatever's happening as far as bigotry in terms of the right wing and in America is dangerous and it's not safe. But anyway, it was nice to have a free and open conversation with a new work colleague of a younger generation. Okay, that's it. Stay safe, stay friendly, look after your friends and family. Bye-bye.